Good morning, namaste, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class. Om Sarva Jiva Papanashakaranam Bhaveshwaram Svikritam cha garbhavasa dehapashamidrisham Yapitam swalilaya cha yena divya jivanam Yapitam swalilaya cha yena divya jivanam Tannamami Deva Deva Ramakrishna Ishwaram. Om Shri Vivekanandari Satchishya Supujitaya Shri Sharada Devya Virata Sevitaya Shri Ramakrishna Paramahamsaya Avatara Varishtaya Chate Namaha. We salute Sri Ramakrishna, God of gods and Lord of existence, who of his own free will took on human birth and lived a harmonious life, a luminous life of divine play for the destruction of human ills. We salute that incarnation of God, Paramahamsa Ramakrishna, who was worshipped by pure-hearted disciples like Vivekananda, and who was ceaselessly served by Sri Sarada Devi, the Divine Mother herself. Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadattatam Bhuvi Grinanti Ye Bhurida Jana. O Lord, your nectar-like words are praised by the wise and full of auspiciousness. They destroy the curse of evil, bring good to those who hear them, and bring new life to those who are scorched by the ills of worldly existence. Magnanimous indeed are they who spread your words. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this morning we will continue where we left off last time, which is on October 16th, 1883. That was a Tuesday, I believe. Yes, a Tuesday. And just a few days after the Durga Puja celebration that year in 1883. And we're on page 308, about 1/3 of the way down. And so continuing the conversation, Sri Ramakrishna says, Vedanta does not recognize the incarnation of God. According to it, Chaitanya Deva is only a bubble of the non-dual Brahman. And that's where we ended the discussion last time. And so here, when Sri Ramakrishna speaks of Vedanta, as is normal in the gospel, and was normal at that time, when people spoke of Vedanta, they meant Advaita Vedanta. And even today, many people, when they speak about Vedanta, they mean Advaita Vedanta, though there are many types of Vedanta, like the school of Sri Chaitanya, whom Sri Ramakrishna has been speaking about on this day and will continue to speak about in a moment. He taught a particular type of devotional Vedanta, which was dualistic, not non-dualistic. So there are many types of Vedanta, but Sri Ramakrishna, in keeping with the general custom, meant by Vedanta Advaita Vedanta. And so in Advaita Vedanta, everything here is a manifestation of the ultimate reality, the non-dual reality. Everything is the whole of that reality, because it being non-spatial, beyond space and time, it can't be divided. Things can be divided by space and by time, but that which is outside of space and time, there's no possibility of dividing it. And so you can't have part of it here, part of it there, part of it there, part of it there. The whole of it is everywhere. The entirety of it is everywhere. And so everything here is, in that sense, an incarnation of God. And every being in particular, every jiva, every living being, human and non-human conscious being, sentient being, is an incarnation of that reality. So Sri Ramakrishna says that the Vedanta does not accept the incarnation of God in the specific sense of a particular person coming in the special technical sense as an incarnation of God, as with the case of Rama, Sri Krishna, Jesus, Sri Chaitanya, and himself, Sri Ramakrishna. He says, according to it, Chaitanya Deva is only a bubble of the non-dual Brahman. And so Swami Vivekananda said from the standpoint of Advaita, he says that all of the incarnations are bubbles on the ocean of myself, or waves on the ocean of myself. That I am the ocean and incarnations are waves on that ocean, which I am. So that's the attitude of the non-dualist. So Sri Ramakrishna continues, do you know what the vision of divine consciousness is like? It is like the sudden illumination of a dark room when a match is struck. And so illumination, when it happens, they say, it is a sudden affair. That's why it says, like striking a match. One moment the room is dark, and the next moment it's flooded with light. And so it's like that. Swami Vivekananda said that when illumination happens, it is a sudden affair. You could even say that at this time, on this day, it happened. The experience itself is beyond time and space and outside of history, but from the standpoint of us living within time, you could say within this point of time, so-and-so attained to illumination in this moment. In Buddhism, there's a debate. In the schools of Mahayana Buddhism, there's a debate between the schools of gradual illumination and the schools of sudden illumination. Zen Buddhism, or Chan as it's known in China, the original school, says that illumination is sudden, is not a gradual process. And so all of their effort is to attain to the sudden awakening, sudden illumination. And other schools of Mahayana Buddhism say that it's a gradual process. You gradually remove the ignorance, you come closer and closer to Buddhahood. So Vedanta accepts both, but says that the Zen school is ultimately correct, that the actual illumination, that comes suddenly. But the process leading to it is a gradual process. So the process is not gradual illumination, it's a gradual process of purification. And then when the illumination happens, it's sudden. And so Sri Ramakrishna says that the vision of divine consciousness, when that happens, is like striking a match in a dark room. Suddenly there's light. One moment it was dark, and then suddenly there's illumination. He continues, the incarnation of God is accepted by those who follow the path of bhakti, of devotion. A woman belonging to the Karta Bhaja sect observed my condition. This was during the period of his sadhana, as the 12 years when he spent in spiritual practice. And for him, spiritual practice meant it was repeated experiences of illumination. Practice and then illumination, and then another practice and illumination, etc. So a woman belonging to the Karta Bhaja sect observed my condition at that time and remarked, you have inner realization. Don't dance and sing too much. Ripe grapes must be preserved carefully in cotton. Don't the mother-in-law lessens her daughter-in-law's activities when the daughter-in-law is with child. One characteristic of God realization is that the activities of a man with such realization gradually drop away. This is the woman still speaking. Inside this man, meaning Sri Ramakrishna, is the real jewel. And that's the end of her words that Sri Ramakrishna is quoting. So here we see several things. Both we see the wonderful instruction she gives, but we also see that this is where Sri Ramakrishna got a statement that he used to make often later, and which is found several times here in the Gospel. That is, that when the daughter-in-law in the house, the new daughter-in-law, is with child, when she's pregnant, at first she carries on, as Sri Ramakrishna says in his expanded version of the parable. At first she's allowed to go about her regular duties, do all of the work of the house as she has been doing. And so that's like a person who is on the spiritual path, but not yet at the state of illumination, but they are working towards that. Then they are fully active. But as they near the state of illumination, like the daughter-in-law who is with child, when she nears the time of delivery, the mother-in-law begins to lessen her duties, to be careful with the pregnancy. And then when the time comes when the daughter-in-law gives birth, then all of her time is spent with the child. She has no more duties. And so he said the same with the spiritual aspirant. In the beginning and for a long time, work continues at full pace. But then when illumination comes near, then works begin to fall away. And at the time of illumination, then work drops off. There was the great Swami Shantananda, a disciple of Holy Mother, who I had the blessing to meet several times in 1971 on my first trip to India. I think he passed away around 1973. He was known to be an illumined soul, and his illumination had been confirmed by Swami Brahmananda and Swami Turiyananda way back then, in the beginning of the 1920s. And I knew him in 1971, so he had lived a long life in a state of illumination. And so you see, he's mentioned in the Life and Conversations with Holy Mother several times. And in one place, he tells Holy Mother that, I think he writes to her, that he's very upset that he's been practicing discipline, but he's not getting anywhere. And Mother writes to him and says, "Don't worry, in time everything will come." And so by around, I don't know when it was exactly, but around 1920, because these two Swamis passed away in 1922, Swami Turiyananda and Brahmananda. So around 1920, he went to 2021, he went to Swami Brahmananda and told him that, Maharaj, I find it very difficult to engage my mind in work. What am I to do? And Swami Brahmananda said, "What? You are still working? No, that's over for you. That's over for you." And then the Swami Turiyananda also independently confirmed that he was in this state of illumination. But because Swamiji had told the monks of the order that everyone should engage in karma yoga, everyone should work. So Swami Shantananda continued as he was a trustee of Belar Mutt, and he used to go to the regular meetings of the trustees. The people would tell him, senior Swamis would tell him, "Maharaj, you don't need to come. You're such a great soul. There's no need for you to attend these meetings." Because he would come and he wouldn't participate. He would sit there and his mind absorbed. But he said, "No, Swamiji wanted all of us to work. And so at least let me do this much." But he was in that state where, other than that, he couldn't do any work. Yes, I would see him walking around. He would eat and do other normal things, but just the ordinary activities that are necessary for living. Otherwise, his mind was absorbed. So again, Sri Ramakrishna tells that it's this woman of the Karta Bhaja sect, which was a tantric sect, that told him this story. And she told him also that you shouldn't dance and sing so much, that just as ripe grapes have to be laid in cotton to protect them from bursting open, because they're very delicate when they're ripe. So because of your state of inner realization, you should be careful. You should keep your mind and body under control, not to give so much expression in dancing and singing, but keep the mind calm and indrawn. So it's very interesting that she also says that in the next paragraph, she Sri Ramakrishna says, watching me eat, this woman, she remarked, "Sir, are you yourself eating or are you feeding someone else?" So what a wonderful statement, because seeing Sri Ramakrishna eating, she felt, because she herself must have been advanced, because she recognized that Sri Ramakrishna was in a state of illumination, and she knew what advice to give him because he was in that state. And so seeing him eat, she must have felt or must have seen that as he ate, it was as if he were feeding someone else. That is, there was no ego involved and no self-satisfaction involved, that his feeding, he saw within himself the Divine Mother. And when he ate, he was feeding the Divine Mother. So watching me eat, she remarked, "Sir, are you yourself eating or are you feeding someone else?" Then Sri Ramakrishna continues, "The feeling of ego has covered the truth. Narendra once said, 'As the eye of man recedes, the eye of God approaches.' Kedar says, 'The more clay there is in the jar, the less water it holds.'" So both of the beautiful statements. Swamiji is in the form of a principle that the more our eye recedes, the more the eye of God appears. And so Sri Ramakrishna used to say that here there are two. And then he would say, "Do you understand? One is the Divine Mother and the other is her devotee." And so he saw himself as a manifestation of the Divine Mother. And sometimes he saw himself as separate as a devotee, but separate only for the sake of relationship, a loving relationship, only for the sake of lila, for the sake of play, as it's said in the Hindu tradition. So when the eye of man recedes, the eye of God appears. In the Jewish Bible, which the Christians also accept, uh, says to Moses to tell the people, "I am that I am. I am that I am," which can be interpreted in different ways, but the Vedantic way of interpreting it, and I like to think the way that God meant it when he said it to Moses, is that I am the I am. And so that sense of I am, which we have, that is the intuition of God. There's only one I am in the whole universe. I am is always singular, experienced only as singular. And so there's only one I am. When I feel that I am, that's a sense, the first person, not he is, she is, you are, etc. But when I sense that I am, that is the experience of God. It's just that it's so clouded in our minds that we don't recognize it. But as our ignorant ego lessens, the eye of God grows. And so then we see that the I am is nothing personal. It is what I am, but that I am is God. And again, it's not an I am out there. It is the sense of I am, the sense that I exist. But that is the sense of God, because there's only one I am. And so God said to Moses, tell the people when they ask who had sent him with the message for the people, tell them that I am that I am. And so as the eye of man recedes, the eye of God approaches. Kedar says, one of Sri Ramakrishna's devotees we've met before, the more clay there is in the jar, the less water it holds. So if you have, we probably all did this as children, make things out of clay, whether it's in kindergarten or school or just at home, make things out of clay. And when you're small, you don't have much dexterity with your hands, and so you try to make a pot, and it's mostly clay with a little depression in it. But a good potter makes a pot which is very refined, with a thin amount of clay, the amount necessary for keeping the vessel strong, but not more than needed for that, so that it holds more water. So the more clay there is, the less water it holds. And so the more the clay of ego, the more clay of self-importance there is, the less room there is for God. So we have to empty ourselves of ourselves, empty ourselves of self-importance, empty ourselves of the little ego, and then there's more room for God. Krishna said to Arjuna, "Brother, you will not realize me if you possess even one of the 8 siddhis." So now this, of course, is not in the Gita. I don't know where Sri Ramakrishna got it, but there are so many stories attributed to Rama and to Krishna, which collected over the thousands of years of the Hindu tradition when both Rama and Krishna were worshipped. And so there's the Mahabharata, there's the Vishnu Purana, and the Mahabharata has so many Gitas within it, not just the Bhagavad Gita that we know so well, but many other Gitas within it, conversations of Sri Krishna, teachings of Sri Krishna. So whether it's in one of the scriptures or whether it's just part of the oral tradition, because again, many stories would be created by people and attributed to Rama and Krishna. So the historicity of the statement doesn't matter, but it expresses because it expresses a truth. So Krishna said to Arjuna, "Brother, you will not realize me if you possess even one of the 8 siddhis, one of the 8 psychic powers." Of course, there are many other psychic powers, but there are 8 traditional that are spoken of. These 8 give only a little power, Sri Ramakrishna continues. With healing and the like, one may do only a little good to others. Isn't that true? He asks. So with these psychic powers of being able to heal at a touch or heal at a wish, or becoming very heavy or becoming very light or walking on water and all of these things, what good do they do as far as the realization of God? The problem with the siddhis, the psychic powers, is they all pertain just to this. They only enhance this. If we can't realize God with the eyes by looking at things, is a telescope or a microscope going to help us realize God? No, it's just increasing the power of these. If through hearing people chatter and hearing noises and bird singings and things we don't realize God, is it going to help by having a hearing device to amplify the sound? No, that's just the same thing. And so the siddhis, they only enhance the abilities that the ego uses for its own gratification. And so they have nothing to do with illumination, except this. They do have this to do with illumination. That when one attains to illumination, these powers are spontaneously present. But most great souls don't use them. So you see that in Sri Ramakrishna's life, there were very few occasions when people saw him use these powers. He did, but only on occasion and for special purposes. And so with people like Ramana Maharshi and other great souls. So Sri Ramakrishna always used to emphasize that one should not seek psychic powers. These give only a little power. With healing and the like, one may do only a little good to others. Isn't that true? And by using psychic powers to heal others, the danger is that then people are attracted by that, not by the person's spirituality. You see that in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, that Jesus, he had the power to heal. He did heal people out of compassion, and he would tell them, "Go and don't tell anyone what I have done." But of course, the people couldn't contain themselves, and they ran out and told the whole neighborhood. And then people crowded around him, bringing all of their sick for him to heal. And so that's what they're attracted to. They're not attracted to spirituality. So when people would come to Sri Ramakrishna and ask him to heal them, he would say, "Oh, you go to such and such a sadhu. He knows herbs and things like that. I don't do that." He would dispense with them. Now, Holy Mother, of course, she did heal many people. She healed many people, but she did it in her typically very quiet and humble and unobtrusive way. And she did it out of compassion and not for fame, of course. And she also took no credit for it herself. She would give the credit to Sri Ramakrishna, who had passed away. Therefore, I prayed to the Divine Mother for pure love only, a love that does not seek any return. I never asked for occult powers. So yes, Sri Ramakrishna never asked for them, but he only prayed for pure love. Why? Love is nice, but most of us would like a little power also. But no, power doesn't satisfy us. It gives us, yes, it gives the ego a boost, and that's the problem with psychic powers, is that they give the ego a tremendous boost, because suddenly you can do things that nobody can do. Some mysterious power is working through you. It's not really mysterious at all. It's following higher laws, laws that are not ordinarily seen because not enough people possess these powers. And so it seems very mysterious. But it's mysterious only in the sense that I raise my arm like this. That's quite mysterious when you think about it, that I can do that. How mysterious it is. No one knows how it is really, and there are all kinds of knowledge about the nerves and the muscles and the brain impulses and all of that, but still no one really understands how it is that we do a simple act like that. No one understands how it is that we speak. All types of research, many things are known, but nothing that actually explains how it is that we speak. An extraordinarily complex act. So a psychic power is mysterious in that sense, and only in that sense, and no more significant than doing this or speaking. No different from that. And so why should one go for that? But what we really seek in life, the two things we seek in life deeply, even if we don't know it, are love and knowledge. We are seeking love and knowledge. And more than knowledge, we're seeking love. Even knowledge, if it's seeking to know about things, that's a very low thing. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna used to tell people like him, promise me that you will stop reasoning. That's because that's a very insignificant thing too. But knowledge as far as insight into reality, that's a different thing. That is on a par with love. And so these two things, knowledge as insight into reality and love for that reality, those are the only two things that matter and the only two things that will satisfy us. While talking thus, Sri Ramakrishna went into samadhi. He sat there motionless, completely forgetful of the outer world. Then coming down to the sense world, he sang, and only the first line is given here, "Ah, friend, I have not found him yet, whose love has driven me mad." A song about the love for God, which has driven the devotee mad, but which has not yet been completely filled. And so that's a beautiful state where one is consumed by longing for God. One has intense love where the whole of one's being is oriented towards God, like the filings towards iron filings towards a magnet. But it has not yet been fulfilled. And so that longing consumes the person. And through that longing, all of one's karma is exhausted. So it's said of the gopis that their bad karma was exhausted through their longing, and their good karma was exhausted through the ecstasy of union with Krishna. And thus they were freed from karma once and for all. At the master's request, Ramlal sang a song describing how Chaitanya embraced the monastic life. And that song is, and this is a song by the great saintly devotee Prem Das. "Oh, what a vision I have beheld in Keshav Bharati's hut." So Keshav Bharati was the sannyasi, the Swami, the monk, who gave sannyasa to Sri Chaitanya. Sri Chaitanya took sannyasa, saying that no one will listen to me as long as I'm wearing the cloth of a householder. Because he was married. In fact, he was married twice. His first wife died very soon after marriage, and then he married again to Vishnu Priya. And so he was a householder. But then he took sannyasa because he said that no one will listen to my words unless I have the badge of authority, the cloth of the sannyasin. And so he took his sannyasa from Kesha Bharati. And so that means that Sri Chaitanya was in the lineage of sannyasis of the order of Shankaracharya, because Kesha Bharati belonged to the Bharati among the Dashanami Sampradaya, the 10 named sects of sannyasins organized by Sri Shankaracharya. Much more ancient, but organized by Sri Shankaracharya, reformed by him. And so he belonged to the Bharati sect, as we of the Ramakrishna order belong to the Puri sect. They're Puris, Giris, Bharatis, Aranyas, and Saraswatis, and 10 different named sects. So though Sri Chaitanya school became later, after Sri Chaitanya's time, it identified itself with Madhvacharya's Dvaita, dualistic school of Vedanta. Chaitanya himself took sannyasa from a member of the sannyasis of the Shankara school. So again, oh, what a vision I have beheld in Kesha Bharati's hut. Gora, that is Sri Chaitanya, in all his matchless grace, shedding tears in 1,000 streams. Like a mad elephant, he dances in ecstasy and sings, drunk with an overwhelming love. Rolling flat upon the ground and swimming in tears, he weeps and shouts Lord Hari's name, piercing the very heavens with his cries, loud as a lion's roar. Then most humbly he begs men's love to feel himself the servant of God. So that's a sentiment of the Vaishnavas, that they want to be a servant of God and they want to be a servant of the devotees as well. So that's what this refers to. Then most humbly he begs men's love to feel himself the servant of God. Shorn of his locks, he has put on the yogi's ochre cloth. Even the hardest heart must melt to see his pure and heavenly love. Smitten by man's deep woe, because again, Sri Chaitanya was deeply compassionate, and he opened the religion of the Vaishnavas to people of all castes. And he really was the last in the line, starting with Shankaracharya. Or actually, I would say Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda were the last in that line to bring India back to the Hindu fold from the period of Buddhistic control. Buddhism had disappeared from much of India by the time of Sri Chaitanya, but it still existed in Bengal and Orissa. And it was through the popular religion that Sri Chaitanya spread among the masses, among the common people of all castes, that really ended the Buddhistic period in that part of the country as well. So smitten by man's deep woe, he has abandoned everything and pours out love unstintingly. Oh, would that Premdas were his slave, and passing from door to door, might sing Gauranga's endless praise. So that's the end of the song. The master asked Mani Malik to quote the words of Tulsidas to the effect that one who had developed love of God could not observe caste distinctions. So Mani Malik, a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, said, "The throat of the chatak bird is pierced with thirst. All around are the waters of the Ganges, the Jamuna, the Saraju, and of innumerable other lakes and rivers. But the bird will not touch any of these. It only looks up expectantly for the rain that falls when the star Swati is in the ascendant. So Sri Ramakrishna asked him to tell a story about Tulsi's words, that a devotee doesn't observe caste distinctions, and he tells some other story about Tulsi Das. He comes next. I guess he realized that he'd given the wrong quotation, as we do. All of us do that sometimes. And then the next paragraph, he gives the story that Sri Ramakrishna had wanted. But first he tells this. But Sri Ramakrishna used to say the same thing, that the chatak bird, it only drinks water when the star Swati is in the ascendant. And otherwise, it won't drink from lakes or ponds or rivers. Only when rain falls, when Swati is in ascendant, the chatak bird catches drops of water. That was obviously a folk belief that was current in the time of Tulsidas also several centuries earlier, and Tulsidas had said that. So then the master says, that means that love for the lotus feet of God is alone real and all else is illusory. So the chatak bird waits only for rain falling at that time, because it illustrates the fact that only the love of God is real. Everything else is illusory. And so the chatak bird symbolizes the soul who won't accept anything else but the divine. Money. Tulsi also said, and now he actually says what Sri Ramakrishna had asked him to, at the touch of the philosopher's stone, the 8 metals become gold. Likewise, all castes, even the butcher and the untouchable, become pure by repeating Hari's name. Without Hari's name, the people of the 4 castes are but butchers. So a wonderful statement for Tulsidas, that when one repeats the name of God, all are purified, whatever their profession, whatever their background, everyone is purified. But those who don't repeat the name of God, then they are impure no matter what caste or class they belong to. That those who are forgetful of God, they are the low caste people. Those who repeat the name of God with devotion, they are pure and high caste no matter what their profession, what their background, what their family line might be. Master Sri Ramakrishna says, the hide that the scriptures forbid one to touch can be taken inside the temple after it has been tanned. So the animal hide, which according to the scriptures is impure, you shouldn't touch it. Its touch defiles you, the animal skin. But when it has been tanned, then it can even be used in the temple. And so we are impure until we meditate on with devotion the name of God. Then we become pure, both inside and out. Man, he continues, becomes pure by repeating the name of God. Therefore, one should practice the chanting of God's name. I said to Jadu Malik's mother, Jadu Malik had a house just next to Dakshineshwar, and a garden house, as well as his larger house in Calcutta. And so Sri Ramakrishna knew Jadu Malik and his mother. I said to Jadu Malik's mother, in the hour of death, you will think only of worldly things, of family, children, executing the will, and so forth. The thought of God will not come to your mind. The way to remember God in the hour of death is to practice now the repetition of his name and the chanting of his glories. If one keeps up this practice, then in the hour of death, one will repeat the name of God. When the cat pounces upon the bird only squawks and does not say, Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna. So here, a beautiful paragraph. Let me start with what we read last about the cat jumping on the bird. Here he's talking about a parrot or some other talking bird that's been taught. As often you find in India, birds are taught to repeat the names of God. And so the bird says, Rama, Rama, Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, or other names of God. And so it goes on all day squawking the names of God. But when the cat pounces on it at the time of death, that is, then it only squawks. It doesn't repeat the name of God. And so what good did repeating the name of God do the parrot? It did no good. And so with us, if we repeat the name of God, but without any attention and without really paying attention to what we're doing, then at the time of death, it's not going to do us any good. But if we can, at least for some time every day, say it with some devotion, with some attention, then at the time of death, the name of God will come to protect us. And so he's saying, in the length of the paragraph, or the whole paragraph, that we have to practice now so that at the time of death we remember God. And that was his advice to Jaddu Malik's mother, who was elderly, and telling her that you're not going to remember God at the time of death. You'll just be thinking about worldly things, and that way you will die. But if you repeat the name of God now, then at the time of death, that will protect you. So in the hour of death, you will think only of worldly things, he said to his mother. The way to remember God in the hour of death is to practice now the repetition of his name. So that people sometimes ask, my friend just lost her mother. What can I? And she's so distraught she can't control her mind. What should I say to her? And so at that time, of course, you out of sympathy, you have to say something. But the fact is that if you want to be able to bear the tragedies of life, they come to all of us from time to time. It's not always a tragedy, but all of us face tragedy sometimes. If you want to be able to face tragedy, you have to work now. At the time of the tragedy, it's too late. At the time of tragedy, you revert, because of the intensity of the experience, you revert to habit, that which is natural to you. And that which is natural is what you have spent most of your time thinking about. But if we have practiced repeating the name of God, doing japa, then when tragedy comes, then that will come to us. That we will take refuge in that. And so we have to practice now, not wait till the end. We have to practice that now. Sri Ramakrishna continues, it is good to prepare for death. One should constantly think of God and chant his name in solitude during the last years of one's life. If the elephant is put into the stable after its bath, it is not soiled again by dirt and dust. So if you bathe the elephant and leave it out in the outside of the stable, then of course it rolls in the dust. It picks up with its trunk. It picks up dust and throws it over its back, and it gets walks in mud, etc. So if it's a temple elephant or a royal elephant where it's for ceremony and for exhibit, and you want to keep it clean and beautiful, then you wash it and then put it into the stable until the time comes for the exhibition. Then only when that's over, you let it back out into the dirt. But of course, that's not part of the analogy. The analogy is that if you put the elephant in the stable after bathing it, it will stay clean. And so the mind also, if we repeat the name of God, then that will cleanse the mind, and then at the time of death, we will be prepared for it. So one should chant his name in solitude during the last years of one's life. One should, in order to prepare oneself for the moment of death. Then M says in his narration after what Sri Ramakrishna just said, Balaram's father, Mani Malik, and Beni Pal were all elderly men. Did the master give this instruction especially for their benefit? So Sri Ramakrishna assumes, brought this topic up because of the three old men in his company on that day. Master, why do I ask you to think of God and chant his name in solitude? Living in the world day and night, one suffers from worries. Haven't you noticed brother killing brother for a foot of land? The Sikhs said to me, the cause of all worry and confusion is these three: land, woman, and money. And of course, he was speaking to an audience of men, If he were speaking to an audience of women, he would have said land, men, and money. And so it's interesting that that's what the Sikhs had told him. Sri Ramakrishna had a number of Sikh devotees who would come to see him. And they considered Sri Ramakrishna one of their own because he could speak with everyone in their own language, not meaning their English or Swahili or other human languages, but in terms that they could, religious terms that they could understand, and the language of their religion he could speak. And so the Sikhs looked on Sri Ramakrishna as their own, and he had great respect for them. Then Sri Ramakrishna continues, "You are leading a householder's life. Why should you be afraid of the world? When Rama said to Dasharatha, that is his father, that he was going to renounce the world, it worried his father, and the king sought counsel of Vashishta. Vashishta said to Rama, Ram, why should you give up the world? Reason with me. Is this world outside of God? What is there to renounce, and what is there to accept? Nothing whatever exists but God. It is Brahman alone that appears as Ishvara, Maya, living beings, and the universe." So this is a story from the Yoga Vashishta. I don't know if it's mentioned, I don't think it's mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana, but it's highly developed in the Vashishta Ramayana, or the Yoga Vashishta as it's called. There Rama goes on pilgrimage to many pilgrimage places. He's still young, still unmarried, and goes on pilgrimage to many places and returns to the royal city, to Ayodhya. And after returning, it's noticed that a big change has come over him. He's no longer interested in the affairs of the palace. He's not interested in his princely duties. He's not interested in his elephants and horses or anything else. He just sits in his room and broods all day and seems completely distracted, uninterested in food, uninterested in song and dance, uninterested in entertainment, uninterested in the life of the palace. So his father becomes very worried. And finally, after this has gone on for months, he calls the great sage Vashishta, and Vashishta comes and talks to Rama, and finds that Rama is full of the spirit of renunciation, that on his pilgrimage going to these holy places, Rama has seen through the vanity of worldly life, and now nothing interests him. And so then Vashishta convinces him that a bird can fly with only two wings, and one wing is the wing of knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and the other wing is the wing of work. So you have to carry both together, knowledge and work. That is spiritual knowledge and work in the world. And so the rest of the Yoga Vashishta, the vast mass of it, is a huge text in 12 volumes in English translation. No, I'm sorry. I think it's 4 volumes in English translation, but 4 good-sized volumes in English translation. The rest of the Yoga Vashishta is Vashishta teaching Rama about the nature of the truth, how to realize the truth, and at the same time, how to live in the world. So this is referring to that period of Rama's life, that when Rama said to Dasharatha that he was going to renounce the world, it worried his father, and his father sought the counsel of the sage Vashishta. So then Vashishta, as Sri Ramakrishna says it in very simple terms, he didn't take 4 volumes to say it. He says that, is this world outside of God? God has become everything here. God is Ishvara, that is the personal God. God is Maya. God is all living beings. God is material nature. Everything here is a manifestation of God. If you have that knowledge, then what do you accept and what do you reject? You give up acceptance and rejection. So Balaram's father says, "It is very difficult, sir." And indeed it is. The master says, "The aspirant, while practicing spiritual discipline, looks upon the world as a framework of illusion." That this whole world is a framework of illusion, like a Hollywood set. the Hollywood set. And you can see some of these sets if you go to some of the studios in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, California, or in Burbank. Storefronts and things that are used in westerns and in small town America and so forth, but it's just a storefront. Behind is just boards supporting the front. There's no inside, and so it's just a framework of illusion. It gives you the sense that there's a old-time Western town here, or a Middle American town of the 1800s or something like that. But it's just a framework of illusion. So the aspirant, while practicing spiritual discipline, looks upon the world as a framework of illusion. Again, after the attainment of knowledge, the vision of God, this very world becomes to him a mansion of mirth. As it was to Sri Ramakrishna, the world was a mansion of mirth, where he was constantly in ecstasy, because he saw God everywhere. He saw everything as God. It is written in the books of the Vaishnavas, God can be attained through faith alone. Reasoning pushes him far away. Faith alone. So that's Sri Ramakrishna used to say oftentimes, the need for faith. Not blind faith, but faith which is living, a deep conviction. Rabindranath Tagore said famously that faith is the early morning bird that sings before the sun has risen. The bird knows that the sun is going to rise. It hasn't risen. The bird hasn't seen the sun yet, and yet it knows that the time of its rising is nigh. And so it begins to sing. And so that is faith. The faith, the conviction that I know God is. I haven't seen God yet, but I know God is. There's no more doubt. The mind has grasped to this truth and held on to it. So then Sri Ramakrishna continued, what faith Krishna Kishore had. So Krishna Kishore was an acquaintance of Sri Ramakrishna, a devotee who had passed away and already. So what faith Krishna Kishore had. At Vrindavan, a low-caste man drew water for him from a well. Krishna Kishore said to him, repeat the name of Shiva. After the man had repeated the name of Shiva, Krishna Kishore unhesitatingly drank the water. He used to say, if a man chants the name of God, does he need to spend money anymore for atonement of his sins? How foolish. So for those not from India, they have to understand that the sense of caste distinction and the sense of what is proper to take from what caste was very strong. It was something that was just assumed in the society. And so from a modern standpoint, we may look on it as a superstition, but this was as real to people of that time as many things that we think of today as real, but which are just superstitions are. We have our own deeply held beliefs, which are just based on social convention. And so this was something that was just accepted in society. And there was a philosophy behind it, of course, all of that. But the idea of taking food or water from a person of low caste was something that you just you couldn't imagine doing. It's like for us, if we're brought up in a clean environment where things are kept neat and tidy or something, and someone offers us something to eat with a filthy, dirty hand that's been in filthy places and they haven't washed their hands, we think, no, I'm not going to eat that. So just like that, the same idea is with someone of a low caste giving you something to eat, you wouldn't at that time take it. So those distinctions are disappearing in India now, and largely have disappeared, except in the villages. But so again, at that time, if we read this from a Western perspective, we think that, well, what's the big deal? This doesn't illustrate anything. No, it does illustrate something, because Krishna Kishore was someone who was brought up in that environment. And yet he had such faith in the name of God that he thought that that purifies everything. And so it was because of a deep conviction. It was not just because he thought, oh, this is silly superstition, who cares about that? No, not that at all. He accepted it as part of the social standard. Krishna Kishore was amazed to see people worshiping God with the sacred tulsi leaf in order to get rid of their illnesses. At the bathing ghat here, he said to us, "Please bless me that I may pass my days repeating Rama's holy name." Whenever I went to his house, he would dance with joy at the sight of me. Rama said to Lakshmana, "Brother, whenever you find people singing and dancing in the ecstasy of divine love, know for certain that I am there." Chaitanya is an example of such ecstatic love. He laughed and wept and danced and sang in divine ecstasy. He was an incarnation. God incarnated himself through Chaitanya. And so here again, he's illustrating the importance and the effects of faith, deep faith. And first using Krishna Kishore as an example of faith, who had the firm conviction that if one had recited the name of God, then one was pure inside and out. Nothing more was necessary. Going through rites of offering tulsi leaves and things in order to cure one of illnesses and things, he saw that those as quite unnecessary. Just depend on the name of God. Then whatever you need will come to those who depend on the name of God. Of course, that doesn't mean that if you repeat the name of God, whatever you want will come. No. But whatever you actually need, that will come, whether it's illness or whether it's healing, that will come through the repetition of the name of God. So Sri Ramakrishna sang a song describing the divine love of Chaitanya. Then Balaram's father, Mani Mallik, Benipal, and several other devotees took leave of the master. So we'll continue here next time. So let me give announcements, and then if there are a couple of questions, I can take those. So for announcements, the big announcement, of course, is this Saturday, the 9th of October. We have our Durga Puja, and it will be here in the temple. It will be live streamed as you're watching this lecture. This also will be live streamed on our YouTube channel. So you can watch the puja there. It will start at 10:30 in the morning on this Saturday, day after tomorrow. And by 12:15 to 12:30, the puja will be over. And after the bhog and the arati will be over. And so people who would like, and we encourage you to come, you can come, and one family unit at a time will be allowed to come in to pay their respects to the deity, offer flowers, pushpanjali, and receive prasad, packaged prasad that has been offered to the Divine Mother Durga. So we invite all of you to come. So between 12:15 and 1:30, you can come. After that, it'll depend on whether there's someone here to open the door. But try to come between 12:15 and 1:30. And as long as people are still coming, we'll keep the door open, of course. So those are the announcements. And then next week we will continue. There'll be no Sunday service. Saturday, the Durga Puja. Sunday, no lecture. And next week we'll continue the classes as usual. Okay. So Susan. Okay, the question is, could I explain a little more about what are the signs and how can one get control of the ego? So how to get control of the ego, that depends on one's path. But there are several things that, whatever our path, there are several things that all of us need to do to work at that. One thing is to understand what the ego is, that the ego is, it's an imposter. The ahamkara is that which takes the pure sense of I am, which comes from the divine self. It takes the sense of I am and reflects it onto the mind and body, so that I think I am this. So I am the I am. The I am is real. The sense of I am is real. It comes from the divine self itself, and that's who I am. When I say I and I am, I should think of that, but I don't. I think of this, that I am Swami Atmarupananda sitting here speaking. And so understanding that the I am is what takes the real I am, the light of the self, and applies it to the body and mind. So if I'm on the path of knowledge, I try to discriminate and realize, try to hold on to the sense of I am and dissociate it from the mind and body and realize that that's the light of the infinite, and to give less importance, less and less importance to this person that I think I am. If I'm on the path of devotion, then I can accept this limited sense of I am and say that I am the child of the Divine Mother. I am the servant of God. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say the servant ego, or the child ego, the child of the Divine Mother ego, that is the ego of knowledge. And so if we associate the sense of self with God, I'm a child of Sri Ramakrishna, I'm a child of the Divine Mother, I'm a servant of Sri Ramakrishna, or the Holy Mother, or the Divine Mother, then that is the way to knowledge. Helping others, serving others, being kind to others, that also lessens self-importance. Seeing that the joys and sorrows of others are as important as my own joys and sorrows, that lessens the sense of separation, the sense of ego. And so everything we do in spiritual life, in some way, is lessening the ego or transforming the ego, that is, into the spiritual sense of I am. So, why was Krishna Kishore amazed to see people worshiping God with tulsi leaves? Yes, that's not explained, but my understanding of it is that this is an assumption because, again, it's not said in the text. So, in such places, we have to guess. There's no other way. There's not some divine secret whereby we can unlock what Sri Ramakrishna was intending. It's just by guesswork. And so the more educated our guess, the more accurate it's likely to be. But my guess to this is that, as I said at the end of the class, Sri Krishna Kishore was thinking that why do people go to these rites? Why do they think that I have to do this rite in such and such a way with tulsi leaves for this purpose, for healing for my child or healing for someone else? When the name of God is all sufficient. You see, there are so many rites and rituals and so many complexities we can go to for different problems. If there's this type of illness, there's this type of mantra to repeat and this type of ceremony to go through. And if there's this kind of problem in the home with the husband or the wife or the child or whatever, then there's this type of ceremony that you can do and repeat this mantra so many times and do this when such and such astrological configuration is there. No, none of that is needed for one who's devoted to the name of God. The name of God is all sufficient. You don't need to look for all these specific rites and rituals to effect a certain outcome. So that's my understanding of it. So then I find it effortless to love God in the human form of a guru, but difficult to love an abstract, impersonal God. Yes, of course, that's true. That's a common problem, and the problem is well stated by you. That I find it effortless to love God in the human form of a guru, but difficult to love an abstract, impersonal God. So first of all, an impersonal God, that is Brahman, no one practices devotion towards Brahman as the impersonal reality. We practice love and devotion towards a personal God. So what I think you mean is a God whom I don't see and have no experience of, an unknown God. How can I love an unknown God? So if we want to follow the path of the impersonal, then it's not the path of devotion. We're trying to know the reality. So that's the path of the impersonal. But if we're following the path of the personal God, that is the path of devotion. So that's not impersonal, but it's unknown. And so I think that's what you mean by impersonal. So that is difficult. Abstract because it's unknown. So what we have to do is to begin to make God real to ourselves. That's why we try to love an aspect of God, an ishta, a chosen ideal, like Sri Ramakrishna or Jesus or Krishna or Rama or Shiva or Kali, one that's appealing to us. Then it's less unknown because we can find out more about them, we can associate with them, we can think about them, we can relate ourselves to them. And so if we want to practice devotion, the best way is through the idea of a chosen ideal, taking some manifest aspect of God, whether it's a deity or an incarnation of God. And some say an incarnation of God is even better than a deity because the incarnation of God had a human history, had a human life that we can learn from and identify with. And we can more easily think of them as a human being, but now dwelling in a state of illumination where they are approachable by anyone through prayer and worship. And so still, unknown, yes. But with time, that becomes less and less unknown. It's like there are people, and I've known many such people, not many, but I've known several people, and I've known of more people. It's not uncommon that it happens. People who fall in love through correspondence. And in the old days, when I was a kid, and when I was older, young adult, this would happen with people without the advantage of Zoom and YouTube and video phone and things like that. It was just through physical or through email. It was just through physical letters. And so you would exchange letters and you'd talk to each other and you'd fall in love. You've never seen the person. You really know them only through letters. And yet you could. And so in a similar way with falling in love with God. And finally, how to overcome the fear of death. That through connecting ourselves with God, because then we're connected to the eternal. And we no longer have the fear of death because we are associated with the divine reality. And know that that connection lasts from life to life and will never leave us. So the best way to overcome the fear of death is through association with the eternal. So more could be said, but time is up. So let me say a closing prayer, and then we'll close. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhrita Vai Yeshavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow in adoration to Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, eternal, infinite, the worshipful Supreme Lord, who took human birth out of compassion for all. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe.